I'm so excited that we managed to keep on time, so we have some time for discussion, and also we will be on time for lunch, that I think is important for everybody. So I will use and abuse my moderator's privilege and start asking the questions, and then I will give the audience also some opportunity to raise the questions for these very important panelists. So, I will first make a question for Jaime. Jaime, you show us that the optimal glide path depends on personal characteristics such as education, for example, and risk aversion. Do you believe that target date funds can be designed having in consideration this difference, and at the same time make some difference, but in a way that is easy to understand for the people?
Thank you, Ursula. Yeah, what I'm saying is that making a decision only on your horizon for retirement is probably too simple. People are different, they have different characteristics, and I think it's possible to come up to a mix, right? So maybe some people would like to really take more risk, right? I'm not saying that they will be switching from one fund to the other, like trying to time the market, but they're naturally, they are different, right? They have different assets, they have different preferences, and that opens the door to basically think about that. So if you look what's going on in the US now, that target date funds have been running for decades now, they started talking about personalized target date funds. Some tactical target date funds that can sort of look at the conditions in the market and move a little bit. So what I'm saying is that it's not the only variable that matters. It seems to be important, right? But I'm pretty sure that it is possible to come up to include other characteristics. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I will make a related question to Mark. Mark, you have like your vision in the experience of Nest with choices and people. And you explained that in Nest you have an important default structure, but also you give people additional choices. How important, in your opinion, is providing these investment alternatives to members to better adjust to their characteristic? And what's the experience with that? Do people actively choose these different investments? That's
yes. So I'm glad Nicholas talked about Richard Phelan's Sunstein's book Nudge. So Nudge, it talks about how giving people choice empowers them, but they still take the default. So basically, if you give people no choice, they're more likely to stop saving because they don't trust what you're forcing them into. But if you give them some choice, they feel empowered to make a decision if they want, but only 1% of our members have made that decision. And 99% are happy in the default fund, and we're happy because we're delivering, we think, good outcomes. So I slightly disagree with this idea of personalization. The biggest determinants of outcome are contribution rates, asset allocation, cost. You've got to be low cost, as I think the chart showed, and how you generate the retirement income. So if you can do all that in a very efficient way, and as Nicholas said, a professional way, it's far more likely to deliver good outcomes than trying to tweak it. It's only the very wealthy, or the wealthy and the very wealthy, who just have the degrees of freedom to make those different decisions. For most people, it's, can I generate enough income to live in retirement? And doing that in an efficient way, because you take the benefits of scale and don't add on all those personalization costs, actually will lead to the best outcomes. If you've got a drag that Nicholas talked about of 50 basis points per year for personalization, that's going to destroy all the benefits you can get from maybe a slightly better tactical asset allocation.
So I completely agree, and it's not surprising you and I agree on this. If you look at the people who need the personalization most, it's the people that need this type of savings the least. So to say that a little bit differently, it's the very, very wealthy who have multiple houses, who might have a spouse that also has a defined contribution plan, who have outside assets, outside advisors. So in the US specifically, what 401k plans are for that cohort, it's a supplemental savings plan. And sure, they would like personalization, but they don't need the personalization. When I think of who we're running these products for, it's for the people that cannot afford financial advice. They're the people who are least likely to get the financial advice. So we are their financial advisors. We end up being the default financial advisors. So you can always cohort this in different ways, but I always view our job as not building the best product. It's the best product for the most people.
Okay, thank you very much for your thoughts. So I will move to a different topic with Octavio. Octavio, you made a very relevant point, highlighting that investors and regulators should not be worried about short-term volatility, but about the pension objective. And in this context, do you think that target date funds are better prepared to reduce the volatility of the pension the fund can finance? For example, comparing with multi-funds scheme or other schemes?
Yeah, well, that's the whole objective of this type of vehicles. But it will depend on how committed the asset managers are to their glide paths. If their glide path says one thing and they end up doing another, they're not hedging the risk of the pension. That might happen because of the lack of commitment of managers with their own strategies. And let me bring that with the topic of choice. In these systems, or contrary of the U.S. market or Nest, these are social security mandatory systems. People have to choose one provider. Their level of choose is with which provider is going to run my target date fund. That is the level of choose. Above that, I think it adopts nothing to personalize these strategies.
Thank you so much, Octavio. And I also have a related question for Nick. In your presentation, you highlighted an important aspect when choosing an investment strategy for pension saving is the expense ratio, the cost of it. You have shown that target date funds could have decreased over time and also are competitive compared to other options. Can you explain a bit more depth about that? What are the main forces keeping the cost of these schemes relatively low?
I would say the biggest force is competition. So if I think specifically, there's 4 or 5 index target date fund providers in the US, and we're at the point now where we've become so efficient we have to compete on fees. So we have been able to deliver very high levels of performance, but performance is becoming closer and closer in line because the glide paths will naturally become closer and closer in line. Therefore, all you can do is focus on fees. So it's been a huge benefit to the individual investor who in the 90s was probably paying 2 percentage points for mutual funds in the US, where now they're paying single-digit basis points for target date funds with significantly better outcomes. What's made the portfolio outcomes better, there's a huge industry in the US at about $3 trillion, so lots of research. We went through a number of the pieces of research, so this is a very well-researched place. So for a consumer in the US, there are arguments, and this isn't necessarily our argument, but there were arguments they're better off today than they were in previous structures with defined benefit, because the majority of Americans never had access to defined benefit.
Nice. Thank you very much. I will give now room for some questions from the audience. Please raise your hand and somebody will pass on a microphone.
Gracias. Una pregunta general respecto a educación previsional. Se hablaban de distintas métricas, por ejemplo, la tasa de reemplazo, las unidades de pensión o el investor return. Pero, ¿qué información se le puede publicar al afiliado que sea de valor? Porque actualmente en el esquema chileno se publican las tasas de retorno de corto y mediano plazo y medidas de volatilidad. ¿qué información sería valiosa para el afiliado? ¿Y con qué frecuencia? Porque me imagino que información mensual, dadas las métricas que mencionaron, no tiene tanto sentido.
Me voy a permitir contestar. I will switch to English for my colleagues' benefit. I think what's relevant for the affiliate is what type of retirement he can purchase with the amount that he has in their savings account. That only it matters. It doesn't matter if the total return was 10 or 12%. What will be my pension today if I retire? That's the main information that you could give to the affiliated.
If I could add, completely agree we shouldn't be publishing short-term performance because it leads to people to make bad decisions. So the ideal is you project the likely income in retirement, whenever that is, whether it's tomorrow or 20 years' time or 30 years' time, if you keep contributing. I guess our aim, as Nick was talking about, is to try and reduce the variability of that, or increase the predictability of that income. So one thing we are working on, similar to BlackRock, is having an insured element, particularly if you live a very long time, to make sure you don't run out of money, so that you can have a smooth spending pattern through retirement.
I don't know if any of the other panelists want to...
There's another
okay.
question.
There's another question.
Lots of questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, and good to meet you in person, Ursula, not just on a screen. And I'm pleased you got an actuary on the panel, because, of course, actuaries are very wise human beings. I think my question's a trust one, picking up Mark's point and comments about risk. And it's actually a sort of nudge question. Leading asset owners around the world are realizing that we don't do risk very well. We look at past returns and we look at numbers, and global financial crisis, Ukraine, COVID, we didn't do risk very well, and they're bringing in uncertainty. So my question is, how does a panel think TDF's target date funds will evolve as we bring in uncertainty, which we're probably being taught through climate change, which I shall talk about this afternoon, and the uncomfortable fact that modern portfolio theory doesn't work, because risk is not the volatility of prices, it's the things we talk about. So how are TDFs going to embrace uncertainty? There's the question.
Since I'm holding the mic, I guess I'll have to start off. So we have to look at it in different markets. And I'll try to make this as brief as I can. Different markets will accept different types of risk, and different markets will accept different types of securities, thank you, around the world. So if I think of the US market, which is the market that I know the best, for young investors, they just fundamentally don't know whether the portfolios are risky or not. And one of the reasons is their account balances don't move very much. Because we're saving every 2 weeks in the US, any amount of risk, whether it's GFC, Ukraine, COVID, gets washed out because they're saving. So their savings is such a powerful asset for them when they're young. It doesn't look like the balances move very much. If I was legally allowed to in the US, we would add significant leverage to the portfolios for young investors. We're not going to do that. We're not allowed to do that. But there's so much risk that you can take. It's the older investors that we really have to worry about. And I'll give you a statistic in the US. Something like 2/3 of Americans think they're going to work past 65, but 80% of Americans are retired by the time they're 65. The biggest reason is layoffs. Their health has deteriorated or their spouse's health has deteriorated. So there's a huge amount of behavioral risk around that pre-retirement era. And the trade-off that we have to face is, do we want to give up growth? Because that average American is still going to live for 20 years. A woman will live about 21 or 22 years. And do we add in more certainty, which is through the costs that we're building in, is going to be low-yielding bonds? The longer answer to your question is insurance. There's different types of products in the US. These are starting to gravitate into other parts of the world. Fixed indexed annuities would be one of them. But you can add in these types of certainty products into the portfolio. The problem is cost goes up and your potential growth also goes down. So there's always a balance and there's always a trade-off. But the area that I worry about the most is that 55-year-old to about 65-year-old. That's where risk becomes, the type of risk you're talking about, that drawdown risk, that pain risk really becomes most severe.
So a call option on a deferred annuity?
We're building that now in the U.S. The call option and the deferred annuities are going to trade, if it's a liquid deferred annuity, it trades like a long duration bond fund. So whether we look at what happened in the UK 2 years ago, really the rest of the developed markets in the last couple of years, you're increasing asset volatility and accumulation to reduce income volatility and decumulation with a deferred annuity. There's different types of products that we could have, but we can go down this path later. But that's the type of product that we would have to see into a portfolio. But that's the area that I really worry about, is that near retiree, because they just cannot withstand the loss. And if that near retiree sees a loss of $50,000 or $100,000, they're going to sell, and they're not buying back in at the bottom.
Please go ahead.
Hi. In our proposal of pension reform, each manager must manage 10 TDF. So my question, and in Chile we have 6 billion of members that contribute to the system at this moment. So how many members do you need in a TDF to be optimal?
I don't think it's a matter of how many members. It's a matter of IUMs. There's a certain level of IUMs that makes a fund viable, depending on the market. Mostly the 10 funds rule is based on age brackets. The most common rule for target date funds is 5 years age brackets. Why is that? Because when you design the glide path for certain age, let's take, for example, people from 20 years to 25 years old. You design the glide path for the one in the middle, 22 and a half years. So younger people still have the level of risk approach to their age, and the older people of the cohort are not taking so much risk as the 22-year-old. That's some of the thumb rule. Is not an stochastic rule, it's sort of the thumb rule, but that is why you end up with 10 funds. Given the fact that the Chilean system, I think it runs like $300 billion US. I think the 10 funds, it will be just fine.
Yeah, so we have 50 funds, one for every year retirement, because we've got the scale. So we've got, as I said, 13 million members, $50 billion of assets. So the advantage of one for every year retirement is you can explain to people, look, you're going to retire in 2060, so you're in the 2060 fund. People who don't understand pensions, if they're retiring in 2047, why have you put me in the 2045 fund? That's not my fund. Or the 2050 fund, give me a 2047 fund. So as long as you've got enough people, and again, so the Chilean system has enough people, you can make it much more granular, and it's easier communication, and you can design the glide path for those individuals.
Great, thank you. We have
One of the first.
Yeah, okay, so that question over there, and then here we have another one.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to make a question about the implementation of the target date funds in a mandatory market like in Chile. What do you think about the possibility to have, like in Mexico, a self-defined benchmark or glide path in contrast to a regulatory benchmark with a tracking error? This is the first question. And the second question is, what do you think about allowing people to choose to the adjacent target date funds, not the one that correspond to their cohort?
Let me take the first question. So when the regulator defines the glide path, he's assuming all risk of the policy design and returns over time. Most of that, you will end up with a herd behavior. in the industry. Because if you set up a glide path, a regulatory glide path with a narrow tracking error, you will end up with a herd behavior. And in this type of systems, then the next question will be, why do I want 10 providers running these savings? I can do this with only one provider. So that was the main reflection in Mexico. We cannot define. We have a model of competition of certain providers that define different strategies. Let them make their work, and the authorities make their own work.
Just there's a Give me just a second, Mark. There's the point that I would make is that there's a risk-based framework that the industry needs to partner with regulator on. So it's a tracking error over your established benchmark, not a government-mandated benchmark. So from what you said with the Afores in Mexico, similarly, where if you have a benchmark or if you have a glide path as an individual industry fund, there's a tracking error around that, there's disclosures around that. There is, because if we look down a layer as well, if you say you can have a certain amount of risk assets, but then they're going to say, well, what's the definition of a risk asset? Could you have all emerging markets versus all developed markets? So it continually goes further and further down. I think a better framework is a risk-based framework where somebody establishes a glide path, a benchmark, and then you have a tracking error around that. You have that level of look-through. Different providers will have different views. If I look at Mark's glide path versus what we're doing at BlackRock, they're different. Both are highly defensible. Both have merits. So I think having that level of competition is extremely important in the industry, because once you start to lose those industry providers, you stop the innovation.
Yeah, what he said. So, but I'll answer your second part of the question. So we allow members to change the target date fund they're in, because they know best when they're going to retire, and the chances are that plan will change also. So we put them into the fund that matches their state pension age, their state retirement age, and then if they want to change it, they just log on and it's 2 clicks, you know. So yeah, because so to Mike's point, actually the point earlier about when people retire compared to when they think they're going to retire. In the UK, people think they're going to retire early and end up having to work longer because they haven't got enough money, but that's a, different problem.
Okay, so a question over here. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Gracias. Voy a tomar muy literal algo que dijo Jaime. Disculpa, Jaime, sí, te tomo muy literal. Pero vos mencionaste que se debe maximizar la pensión al momento de la jubilación. Esa es la realidad para países en donde se exige la compra de una renta vitalicia, pero no es la realidad para otro grupo de países que ofrecen, por ejemplo, retiros programados, y en donde para muchos trabajadores van a estar vinculados a una AFP por más tiempo incluso que durante el cual contribuyeron. Entonces el objetivo debería ser maximizar la pensión como un todo, pero eso exigiría la creación de target dates a lo largo del periodo cuando la persona ya está retirada. De lo contrario, estaría reduciendo el monto de la pensión en algunos casos. Quería que elaboraras un poco en ese aspecto. Quizás las otras personas puedan mencionar también alguna experiencia que ha surgido en otro país de situaciones en donde no estrictamente las personas adquieren un producto de pensión, porque el retiro programado no es un producto de pensión puro, sino un producto de esa acumulación durante el cual, si le negamos la posibilidad de tener fondos más riesgosos, le estamos disminuyendo el valor presente de la pensión.
Sí, a ver, mi punto era básicamente que estamos en un ambiente riesgoso y que no basta con mirar solamente un monto al final o una pensión. Estoy completamente de acuerdo con que incluso la misma modalidad de pensión, vas a seguir con renta vitalicia, retiro programado, podría eventualmente cambiar en tus decisiones antes. Estoy de acuerdo con eso, pero era básicamente un ejemplo de decir, mira, hay riesgo, ese riesgo te importa a ti, hay personas que son más tolerantes al riesgo y personas que son menos tolerantes al riesgo.
No, te entiendo. Tal vez la pregunta la parafraseo. ¿Cómo hacemos para ajustar TDF para países en donde no están obligados a comprar un annuity, sino simplemente pueden tener otros productos de pensiones en donde puede seguir percibiendo riesgo, porque tiene que transferir el fondo a una compañía de seguros?
A ver, si entiendo bien, está bien. Supongo que yo sospecho que el seguro de longevidad probablemente te puede servir en esto, ¿verdad? O sea, me parece que donde no tienes annuity, si vas a seguir con retiro programado, bueno, incluso algo que me parece bastante razonable de los Target Date Funds es que tienen una fracción importante de renta variable incluso al momento de retirar, porque todavía estás reconociendo, ¿verdad?, que tienes todavía muchos riesgos y mucha vida por delante. Ahora, si es que no tienes annuity, no sé si estoy pensando bien en tu pregunta, pero si es que no tienes unos annuities, sospecho que uno podría ir considerando un seguro de longevidad, que me parece que es algo que se ha estado discutiendo. Eso yo creo que es como un buen producto. Ahora, los deferred annuities, que a mí me parece eso tremendamente atractivo, de que en el fondo, durante la vida laboral, tú vayas invirtiendo también en estas annuities futuras y comprando unidades de annuity, que es casi al otro lado. Te está preguntando donde no existen, yo estoy diciendo, además hay un mercado, ¿verdad?, a futuro de los annuities.
Un poco para contextualizar, no tiene que ver con el vehículo de inversión, tiene que ver con el diseño del glide path. Si voy a entregar una suma de dinero al final de los 65 años, a lump sum over at a retirement age, entonces yo voy a diseñar un tipo de glide path que optimice el monto que voy a entregar en ese momento. Si voy a comprar un annuity, voy a diseñar un glide path que hedgee el costo de ese annuity. Y si voy a seguir invirtiendo el dinero en la etapa de retiro, entonces es un Target Date True Fund, ¿no? Inclusive ya hay muchos productos de eso en Estados Unidos que consideran que que me voy a comportar como un bono después de la edad de retiro. O sea, es un tema del diseño de la estrategia de inversión. Ahora, no puedes tener todas estas tres posibilidades en un mismo producto. Las vas a tener que segmentar, ¿no? Y ahí va a venir también el nivel de decisión del afiliado en los países donde tienen la posibilidad, ¿no?
So, one of the biggest problems in Australia is that people underspend during retirement. So they live a worse life than they should because they haven't professionalized the retirement income that Nick was talking about. So we've designed a retirement product which has a growth portfolio to keep investing through retirement, cash to take your income, and longevity protection. So it's the three portfolios so you've got three different objectives, but unless you do this for the member, they will have a worse outcome. So it needs to be done professionally, and a target date fund structure works through retirement, but with those three different elements in.
I think we have another question over here. I don't see any more high horizons.
So congratulations, Ursula. I love panels that make me think of questions I didn't wake up knowing. I have seen an asset owner. This is a question, this might be a political economy question for Chile. There you go. I've seen an asset owner and an investment manager competing for the same citizen savings. Do you think we'll see some countries around the world where asset owners will disappear because it's investment managers who usurped their role, or will there always be asset owners helping citizens to make decisions?
We're conflicted, we can't
answer. I think it's not likely because in the case of Latin America, these savings are related to mandatory rules, to social security rules. In that respect, they always will have a nationality. No, regulators must ensure that these comply with the local rules that the Congress set up these savings for. So I don't think globalization will get up to that, starting because we have very narrow foreign investment limits set up by Congress.
So I'm trying to think through the markets that we're in. I'm trying to think through this. I think the answer is no. And if I kind of go down even what's going on in the U.S. and different parts of the U.S. market, you're actually moving more towards the individual owning the asset in self-indexing. So even though BlackRock is delivering the infrastructure, the technology, the securities are still owned by the individual. So as you start to, so the answer to your question is no, I don't think you would see asset owners go away in the institutions.
Then they make a bad decision. Yeah, asset owners, certainly, a lot of them are not for profit, right? Or profit for members. Asset managers are for profit for shareholders. So we should have a cost advantage as asset owners over most asset managers. Now, BlackRock, Vanguard have got the scale to deliver very passive but very low cost structures. As soon as you want to start getting alternatives in, etc., I think we're in an advantageous position.
I don't know if we have any more questions. Question over there. I know who is in charge of microphone.
Mike's got the mic.
Mike, please. You're helpful. Thank you.
Como dijo Octavio, en nuestros países de Latinoamérica, I start again. Como dijo Octavio, en nuestros países de Latinoamérica, todo el tema de la seguridad social está muy regulado. Quería preguntarle tanto a Mike como a Nick, ¿cómo es en sus países? Porque todo esto de los TDFs y 50 fondos y miles de fondos sería bastante complejo, por lo menos en mi país, para supervisar. También coincido con lo que planteó, no me acuerdo quién fue recién, el tema de escala. Mi país en particular es muy pequeño, entonces ir a un esquema de varios TDFs, pienso que faltaría escala justamente. Entonces quería preguntarles eso. ¿A qué supervisión están sujetos tanto Nest como BlackRock en sus respectivos países, en tanto administradores de fondos de pensión en el fondo, ¿no? Gracias.
Shall I start and then I'll just hand over to Nick. So in the UK, when we had auto-enrollment, anyone was allowed to set up what we call a master trust. So it's a multi-employer defined contribution scheme. What has happened is scale has advantages. So there are 3 providers, including Nest, that have 70% market share. And then you've had consolidation of the smaller ones because they can't make any money, right? They're losing money. And the regulator is pushing small schemes to merge. You have to justify why you're running a scheme, even if you're corporate DC pension, if you're too small, because you can't get the benefits of scale. So it's a free market, but a lot of pushes to achieve that scale, which clearly, as Nick will say, has massive benefits for members because you get the cost down.
U.S., in terms of the regulation, it's a wonderful market because while you have target date funds, there's also competitors to target date funds, and these are some of the more personalized solutions. Right now, they're too expensive. But to answer your question about regulation, we're regulated really by 2 parties. One is directly, which is the Department of Labor, and through something called ERISA. That's who writes our laws. We're heavily regulated there. The other one is the U.S. Anybody that works in the U.S. knows that the plaintiff's bar is very litigious. So we've got to deal with lots of class action lawsuits in the U.S., which almost acts as a regulator as well to us. So there's a number of things that we do. You do get a herding behavior in the U.S. because of that, but it's very open to how we can do this. You also asked about how the systems are set up being compulsory versus non-compulsory. We don't have a compulsory savings system in the U.S. for target date funds. Social Security in the U.S. is compulsory. So it's 12.5% of wages, half paid by yourself, half paid by the corporate, up to about $150,000 in earnings a year. That's US Social Security. So the US system is very complex. Once you work your way through the system, and once you have access to the kind of the tools, it's a very healthy system.
Thank you so much to all. I think we are finishing. I think we don't have any more questions. I really want to say thanks to all of you from the amazing presentation discussing. I think everyone will agree with me that we have an amazing discussion. Please, a round of applause for our amazing panelists.